Welcome to Campaign Journal. Another big night for Mitt Romney. He's been declared the winner of the Republican primary in Maryland. He seems certain to win in the District of Columbia, where he's largely uncontested. And the exit polls look good for him in the much more significant and contested state of Wisconsin. I'm Alan Murray. I'm here with Christine Glancy.
Hello.
Glad to have you here.
Thanks.
Let's just take a quick look at the Maryland numbers. And this is not a big surprise, but with only 3% of the precincts reported, it looks like he's got about 53% of the vote. He is being projected as the winner of Maryland. We're going to go straight to Washington, where Jerry Seib is standing by. Jerry, if Mitt Romney wins Wisconsin, and it certainly looks good for him there, is this thing finally over?
Well, yes and no. I mean, that's a Weasley answer, Alan. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. I mean, it's not. It's going to be over in the sense that there's going to be a sense that we're marching toward the inevitable here, and Wisconsin is important because it's a big swing state, and it's an awful lot like Ohio, Illinois, and other big Midwestern states, and it's an awful lot like Pennsylvania, which is where Rick Santorum is going to make his last stand later in the month. And so there's going to be a feeling that, well, look, if Mitt Romney's going to win the big states, what's the point of continuing this? On the other hand, the delegate math tells you he can't wrap this up until probably the end of May. Texas is probably at the end of May. That's probably the last state where he'll have to do well to really close up the delegate math. And so it's not really going to be over in that sense. He's got to continue to march through the primary season, even if we all think it's inevitable.
But on the delegate math, Jerry, at this point, given he's now more than halfway there, what are the odds that he can get all the delegates he needs to wrap up the nomination before he goes to the convention?
Well, the odds are pretty good that he can do it before the convention. The odds aren't very good he can do it before the last week of May, and that's his predicament right now. Look, there are 98 delegates on the table today, in the three the places we're talking about, Maryland, Wisconsin, and the District of Columbia. He's likely to win, 80, 90% of those delegates. That'll bump him up, and he's going to get there. But he's got to go a long ways to go. He's over halfway toward the 1144 delegates that you need to do this, but he's still got several hundred more to win. And if Rick Santorum's view is, I'm going to keep going it through Texas, which is the stated position of his campaign, because we, the Santorum campaign, think states like Texas and other states on the calendar in May are friendly territory for us. The reality is Mitt Romney can't exit primary mode just yet.
So Santorum said yesterday that he thought that a long primary season is good for the party. Does anybody other than Santorum believe that?
Well, some do, and I, in fact, personally was making that argument until a few weeks ago. I'm not sure you can sustain it for a whole lot longer.
When you made that argument, did you think it was going to go?
I think there is an argument that says, basically, the longer that Mitt Romney has to fight for this nomination, the better campaigner he becomes. The more he has to convince party conservatives that they ought to support him, and that will serve him well in November. And it draws attention to the Republican race in states that will be important to the party in a general election. Also allows people to register as Republicans, and they don't go away. They still are registered as Republicans in November, and you can turn those people back out again. So there are arguments to be made that this is beneficial. I do think the strength of those arguments is waning if you're a Republican looking at this and wanting to get on to running against Barack Obama.
Jerry, it's clear he's going to stay in through Pennsylvania. That's his home state. In fact, he's in Pennsylvania right now, and we'll probably hear from him shortly. But I want you to listen to something he said on Meet the Press this weekend about Pennsylvania. Do we have that clip, Harlan? Can you play the Meet the Press? Hang on just a second. But basically what he said was he has to win Pennsylvania. Yeah. Do you think, you were talking about Texas, which is much later in the cycle, and Harlan, let me know when you have that bite ready. But do you think he will, I'm sorry, Harlan? Great. Why don't you play it quickly, and then let's get Jerry to respond. Different soundbite. He's setting different standards at different points, right? But he did say at one point during that interview that if he doesn't win in Pennsylvania, he'll get out. Do you think that's the case?
Well, just a few minutes ago, I heard the campaign spokeswoman for the Santorum campaign answer this very question, and she avoided saying what would happen if he lost Pennsylvania and moved immediately to Texas. So right now, as we're speaking, I think the view of the Santorum campaign is we will win Pennsylvania, and that will launch us on a march at least through Texas at the end of May. And we'll, we have to take them at their word, I suspect, at this point. There were a couple of polls in Pennsylvania in the last week. They both show Rick Santorum up, but barely in his home state. I tend to agree with you, Alan, that it's pretty hard to sustain a campaign when you can't win your home state, and when, in fact, you lost your home state 6 years ago in a re-election bid and can't win it in a Republican-only primary. That's not a great statement, particularly if you come from an important swing state, which is what Pennsylvania is.
And this morning in the paper, we reported that the Republican Party is going to jointly raise funds with the Romney campaign. And does this change the dynamics at all? Do you think for the Santorum?
I think it has the effect of allowing the Romney campaign to go back to donors who've maxed out to them in terms of giving them the maximum amount of money they can for a primary season and say, come on back in and bring your checkbook and write a bigger check this time, because if you give to the Republican Party on my behalf, you can give more money than you can to my campaign for either a primary or a general election, and it allows the dollars to start flowing in to a general election campaign in a much bigger way. As our story indicated, the Republican Party's made this offer to the Santorum and Gingrich and Paul campaigns too, but they can barely generate enough cash to keep going through the primary season. They're not going to have donors who are willing to also pony up for a general election fund right now. So in reality, the Republican Party apparatus is turning toward a Mitt Romney general election campaign, even when it's not saying it in exactly those terms.
Now, Jerry, as you pointed out in the past, there have been a number of times during this long primary campaign where the Romney campaign has attempted to turn towards a general election and been unable to do so. The interesting thing about the last couple of days is that President Obama seems to be fully engaged in that election as well. Yesterday, he sent a shot over the bow of the Supreme Court on that health care decision. Today, he talked about the Republican budget as being an example of social Darwinism. We seem to be now delving into a full-fledged general election campaign.
Right, yeah, and I'm working on a column for tomorrow's paper, and I'm making exactly this point, Alan, that, Mitt Romney is inching toward a general election campaign that no longer seems to be waiting around for him to get started. President Obama dove into the general election campaign rhetoric today in a speech in which he basically said, look, the Paul Ryan budget, the budget presented by the Republican House Budget Committee chairman 2 weeks ago, is in fact the Romney Republican Party budget, and I'm going to attack it as such. And they proceeded to do that. The Paul Ryan budget is, in fact, sort of sharper edged than the Mitt Romney approach would be in terms of spending cuts and pullbacks on entitlements, particularly Medicaid and Medicare. Nonetheless, the president took today, the day of the Wisconsin and Maryland primaries, as the day to hang that budget around Mitt Romney's neck and then proceed to beat him up because of it. So that's kind of the awkward position that the Romney campaign finds itself in. It is sort of tethered to a Republican primary process in which he's still much busier wooing conservative voters in his own party than he is reaching out to voters in the middle. Meanwhile, President Obama is doing exactly that and attacking Mitt Romney as the presumptive Republican nominee, whether he's willing to say that that's what he is or not.
And I just wanted to let viewers know that the AP has called Washington, D.C. for Romney.
Shocked. I'm shocked.
As expected, but it's happened.
And
the polls in Wisconsin have closed.
Washington, D.C., right?
The polls are closed, but we don't know anything yet about Wisconsin. Jerry, let's talk, again, assuming he does win Wisconsin last night, he does seem to be one step closer towards the nomination. The campaign has to have started thinking about running mates, who the appropriate running mate is. About the only name you hear from Republicans these days is Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, because Florida is so important and because he has such a deficit with Hispanic voters. Is that a done deal?
Oh, no, not at all. I think that is simply the flavor of the month, and there are a couple of reasons to think that the Romney campaign might not go in that direction. One is the fact that Marco Rubio continues to say, I'm not interested. The second is there is some question about how much Hispanic appeal a Cuban American from Florida has in places like Colorado and New Mexico and Arizona. So it's not a given that he necessarily gives Mitt Romney a huge advantage in the Hispanic vote, which is an area where he's got a problem. And there just may also be other attributes that personal comfort, for example, that Mitt Romney himself may be more interested in. So Marco Rubio is a popular name, but I think we're a long way from believing that that's the choice, or that the Romney campaign has even thought that hard about it yet.
So give us some other names.
Sure.
You're closer to the gossip center than we are.
Well, the other popular name at the moment is, in fact, Paul Ryan. I talked about his budget a minute ago. He's extraordinarily popular among base Republicans. He's a very aggressive sort of policy wonk who's got a budget out there that's both controversial but also attractive to some people, because in many ways it takes on issues that the Obama administration has avoided. It really does go after the deficit. It does go after entitlements. It would be a huge talking point in the campaign, and if you brought Paul Ryan on, you would have to sort of live with the consequences of that. But on the other hand, he's a very attractive young politician. There's also some speculation about Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey. He said he's not interested, but everybody says they're not interested in being vice president until they're nominated to be vice president. He sort of brings kind of everyman appeal, something that Mitt Romney's been lacking in a little bit. And that would be beneficial. The problem with Chris Christie is he's his own man, and I'm not sure that he's designed, and he will tell you he's not designed to be the number two to anybody. There's some other names that get less attention. Susana Martinez, a Latina who's the governor of New Mexico, not terribly experienced, but competent, smart, articulate, and also punches the Hispanic ticket. That's a possibility. Rob Portman from Ohio, who comes from a swing state, a moderate Republican, who everybody would be comfortable with. The question there is how excited would people be about somebody like that. So there's not a shortage of names. I just think Marco Rubio happens to jump out because there's a certain amount of sex appeal to the idea of getting a Hispanic senator from the state of that it would be the crucially important swing state of Florida.
Okay, Jerry, thanks very much for that report. Just to recap for those watching, Mitt Romney has been declared the winner of the Maryland primary. Seems very likely to win in D.C., where he wasn't really contested. And the exit polls show him with something of a lead in Wisconsin, although we've yet to get any vote counts from Wisconsin. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to another person who continues to stay in this race, Ron Paul. He's in California and will be talking with us right after this break. Welcome back to Campaign Journal. A big night for Mitt Romney. He has been declared the winner of the Maryland primary, certainly favored in the District of Columbia Republican primary, and the exit polls show him looking very good in the Wisconsin Republican primary, though we have yet to get any votes. Here's a look at what happened in Maryland. This is no big surprise. I'm here with Christine Glancy, for those of you who are just tuning in. No big surprise here in Maryland, but with 4% of the votes in, Romney has 52.8% compared to Santorum's 26.9%. So it looks like it's going to be a good night.
Yeah, I think we're going to finally get some numbers in soon.
And his delegate count tonight will take him over the 50% mark.
We believe he's past 600 right now. He's gotten 28 of the allotted delegates from Maryland, so he's over 600.
Having said that, Rick Santorum has made it very clear today that he has no intention of dropping out of the race. He's certainly going to stay through Pennsylvania, and he was talking about Texas now, which was in June. Another person who's staying in the race is Ron Paul, and he joins us now, not from Wisconsin, but from California. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us. Why aren't you in Wisconsin?
I was there last week. We had a grand rally up there. We probably had the biggest rally of the whole campaign. We had, at the university, we had 5,200 show up. But right now, I'm out and I'm do a 3-day tour in California, going to the universities, and we expect to get the same very strong reception.
And so answer this question for us. It's the same question we've been asking about Rick Santorum. Mitt Romney now looks very strong. He's over the 50% mark. He's going into a series of primaries where the polls show that he is in the lead. Why are you staying in this race?
Well, if we were running a mile, that means we would be halfway. So there's a half of the race left, and sometimes people stumble. Who knows? But we haven't counted the delegates even in the primaries that have gone through. The delegate process is sometimes tedious and takes weeks, if not months, to finally find out how many delegates you have. And nobody has an absolute certainty that Romney will have the votes before the convention.
And if you don't get enough delegates to win the nomination, do you have other goals? What would you like to accomplish?
well, participate in the political process. If he's not the winner, and I can't win either, but then there's some negotiations and a convention that is open. Who knows what can happen? And besides, I want to change the nature of the debate. I mean, they're not talking about the issues that I think are important.
But, Congressman, it looks increasingly unlikely that there will be an open convention. At what point will you be convinced of that?
When he gets the number of delegates he needs.
So you'll stay in the race until he gets the delegates he needs, and you will leave at that point?
Well, I don't know what leave means. You get a lot of people leave in different manners. They suspend their campaign or whatever. The delegates are going to be very anxious that have signed up for my campaign. They're going to be very anxious to go to the convention. They're not going to just decide not to go. No. I mean,
and let me ask you one other thing. If it came down to the other two candidates, both of whom look significantly stronger than you in Wisconsin tonight, if it came down to the other two candidates, which one would you favor?
No, I think they're all the same, all three of them the same. I don't know why you decide there's only two other ones. There's three other ones. They're all the same. They're all for more war overseas. They don't concentrate on civil liberties. They don't worry about the Federal Reserve tripling the money supply in a year or two, and they're not worried about the budget deficit. Nobody's proposing cuts. So how can you be for limited government if you're not even talking about those issues? So to pick one of those three, pretty difficult choice.
Now, you seemed during the debates to be most friendly tone toward Mr. Romney, and given his lead with the delegates right now, I wonder if he were the nominee, what's the one thing that you would like to see him change on? What's the biggest position for you there?
Well, there's too many things. I want him to change his foreign policy, his monetary policy, and his fiscal policies, and become more interested in protecting civil liberties, make sure that we don't have the authority for the president to assassinate American citizens and arrest American citizens and put them in secret prisons. I don't want that, and I would want to see some changes in all those areas.
But Christine, it asks a good question. I mean, if you get to the convention, he doesn't have the votes he needs. You're bargaining over whether to throw your support in Mitt Romney's direction. What are you going to ask for?
I don't plan to. I don't have any list to ask for anything. I just know what I think we should be doing in this country to reverse the trend away from personal liberty, and now we have too big a government. We have a deficit debt crisis that's the worst in the history of the world, and it's worldwide. And nobody's even talking about it. So I'm going to be talking about that for as long as possible.
And if you had the chance, would you then support whoever the nominee is?
I'd have to wait and see. I couldn't answer that question right now. It's too early.
What you look at the states that lie ahead? Where you putting your bets? I know you're in California right now, but where do you think you have the best shot of picking up some substantial support?
Well, there's about 5 or 6 states where the process is moving along, like Maine and also Minnesota and Nevada, and there are several others that the process may surprise people. Even in Iowa might surprise some people, too, on how many delegates we get out of there.
How was your day in California? Did you get good turnout?
I'm going to be here for 3 days, but my first event will be this evening.
Okay.
We expect a big crowd at the university.
Well, Congressman, thanks very much for being with us. Good to talk to you, and you've made it very clear you're going to stay in the race until Mitt Romney has enough votes to clinch the nomination, and that looks like that is unlikely to happen before possibly June.
What's going on?
It could go on for some time. I'm sorry. All right, so Rick Santorum is now speaking in Pennsylvania. He's not in Wisconsin either. He's in Pennsylvania. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Here in Pennsylvania, but because of lower natural gas prices, we're seeing manufacturing and other businesses come back in spite of the crushing burden that Barack Obama and his administration has put on our economy. We need someone who understands what liberty is all about, someone who's going to go out and fight to make sure that the biggest and most crushing burden that this administration has put on us, one that was debated just last week in the United States Supreme Court, about government taking control of your health and of course as a result of your very life, and dictating to you what you will do, how much you will pay, what insurance you will get, and even what the practice of your faith will be dictated by the federal government. We need someone in this race who could go out and make the clarion call for liberty. Someone who has stood tall and opposed government-run health care at any level, state or federal, who can go out and make the case of what Barack Obama is doing, which even Justice Stevens suggested, which is what Obamacare does and what his agenda of government control of health care and his attempt to go cap and trade, where he's going to dictate how much energy, not just health care, but how much energy you're going to use. That this is a fundamental change in the relationship between the people and their government. Ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to win this race, we can't have little differences between our nominee and President Obama. We have to have clear, contrasting colors. In the last 120 years, we've had one time where the Republican Party has defeated an incumbent Democrat for president. One time. Time and time again, the Republican establishment and aristocracy have shoved down the throats of the Republican Party and people across this country, moderate Republicans, because, of course, we have to win by getting people in the middle. There's one person who understood we don't win by moving to the middle. We win by getting people in the middle to move to us and move this country forward. Not only do we know who we are here in Pennsylvania and what we stand for, but you know who I am. You're going to hear a lot of things being thrown, as happened in all the other states, where we've seen a whole bunch of negative campaigning. We've gone out across this country, and with the most improbable of odds, and with limited resources, except one in which we've had incredible resources, and that's human resources. The people of this country have stood up and followed because they've seen someone who has a clear, positive vision, someone whose convictions are also forged in steel, not on an Etch-a-Sketch. And so you'll be seeing the negative ads, and you'll be getting the robocalls and all of the other things thrown at us. But you know me. You know how hard I work. You know how strongly I believe in the things that the values of southwestern Pennsylvania have instilled in me. You know that I come from a steel town, from immigrant parents. Grandfather worked in the mines. Someone who lived in government housing on a VA grounds and saw the great sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, serving them as they served our country. You know me. They'll say all the things that I'm someone who doesn't stand up for what I believe in. You know me. And so I ask you over the next 3 weeks, this isn't halftime, no marching bands. We're hitting the field. The clock starts tonight. We've got 3 weeks to go out here in Pennsylvania and win this state. And after winning this state, the field looks a little different in May. I remind everybody, the one time that we did win in the last 120 years, the Republican Party had the courage to go out and nominate someone who all the experts and all the pundits And all the media, all the Republican establishment said couldn't win. He was too conservative. He lost almost every early primary. He only won one until May. One primary till May. Everybody told him to get out of the race. This was back in 1976. They said, get out of the race. We need a moderate. In 1976, Ronald Reagan didn't get out of the race. He was able to stand tall and in May win the state of Texas, which we have every intention of doing. He took that race the entire way to the convention. And he fell short. And in the fall, Republicans fell short because we nominated another moderate who couldn't galvanize our party and bring those votes to our side to get the kind of change that we need in America. And then 4 years later, they fought him again. We need another moderate. We have to defeat this Democratic incumbent. And this time, the Republican establishment lost. Let's not make the mistake of 1976 again. Let's bypass that error and move straight to 1980, and let's defeat a Democratic incumbent, and you can help me here in Pennsylvania. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
That was Rick Santorum, who is in Mars, Pennsylvania tonight, his home state. He said his convictions, Christine, he said his convictions are forged in steel, not on an Etch-a-Sketch. A lot of steel metaphors can be expected in the next few weeks as he works towards that April 24th Pennsylvania primary, where he is now pinning the hopes for keeping his campaign alive.
So there was that jab at Romney, but he hit hard on the economy, on health care. He referenced the Supreme Court decision going on right now. But he also then went to his personal story, and since he's in Pennsylvania, he stressed repeatedly, you know me, you know me. It seemed to be the refrain that he was going back to a lot.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the results as we have them at this point. In Wisconsin, only 2% of the precincts are reported. These numbers show it looking very close. Santorum with 40.9%, Romney with 40.7%. But it's very, very
2%.
early, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that. Let's take a look at Maryland, if we could. Maryland has been Romney has been declared the winner in Maryland with 8% of precincts reported. He has 51.2% of the vote, and Santorum at 28.2%. And the District of Columbia, Romney has a very strong lead. Only 1% of the precincts reported, but 66.9%. Santorum is not on the ballot in the District of Columbia. Let's go to Lee Meringhoff now. He's a pollster watching these numbers. It looks like it's going to be a good night for Romney. Wisconsin is still, it's a little early to tell, but what do you read into these poll numbers in terms of Romney's strength?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. This is as expected, it looks like it's playing out to be a strong Romney win, not only in the states that are up for grabs, but in terms of amounting the delegates. And I think, despite Santorum's, protestations to the contrary, this is becoming a very insurmountable lead in the delegate hunt, and Santorum has just not been able to run up the score with his key supporters, and he certainly hasn't been able, as the exit polls are suggesting, to make inroads into groups that Romney's done well with in the past. So, to the degree that this contest has been about demography, not momentum, and it certainly has been about the demography of these various states, we're seeing that playing out again today. There's just not enough evangelical Christians in Wisconsin or in Maryland, for that matter, and Santorum's not making it up anywhere else.
So give us some more information about that demography. Can you bring us a little bit closer to what you're seeing?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. What we're seeing, Christine, is, there are certain groups, and when, the Santorum, if the state has over, let's say, 50% evangelical Christians, those are the states that Santorum's been able to win in. He hasn't won in a state yet that has had under 50%, and in Wisconsin, we're seeing between 38 and 40% right now evangelical Christians. It's not the right demography for him, and given that he hasn't been able to broaden his appeal, and he isn't running up the score with his key supporters, then that spells a losing scenario for him. I know it hasn't been projected, but the expectation is certainly that Wisconsin's going to go Romney's way.
Yeah, so Lee, it certainly looks like Romney is going to end up with the nomination here. But if you look at the general election polls right now, either in the swing states or nationally, it looks like President Obama has, in the latest polls, anywhere from a 9%, 10%, 11 percentage point lead. Do those polls mean anything at this point?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Yes, they do, but it doesn't mean a whole lot for November. Our poll, incidentally, with the NBC News Marist poll, had Obama only up by 2 percentage points.
Yeah, much narrower.
I know these Gallup swing state polls, but I think those can be a little deceiving. They've been bouncing along because, you know, the different states don't have that many people in them when you look at the whole, 12-state region. So it can create a lot of fluidity that may not be otherwise there. I think the key thing in the national polls is to look at the economy. And in our polls, what we're seeing is a flip. One key question has been, do you think the worst is behind us economically, or do you think the worst is yet to come? Up until our most recent poll, people were telling us nationally that the worst was yet to come, that the glass was half empty. What we're seeing in this most recent poll is that there's been a flip. People think now the worst is behind us. In other words, the glass is half full, and that we've had some economic turnaround. That's really critical in sort of shifting the context, the environment, when an incumbent has to seek re-election. I mean, that couldn't be a more important statistic than that. Still, it's pointing in the right direction economically for the president, but it's it's not an exclamation point by any means. Most people still think we're in a recession. It's not like the numbers are terrific. And then you look at the pain at the pump, the gas prices, and clearly the gas price situation is one that could dog the president in the summer and into the fall. Something to be watched. Right now, slight edge to Obama in our numbers, and others have it a little wider. But very often we're seeing the primary effect going on here. Right now, we're in the middle of a Republican primary season. So in a lot of these individual states, there isn't the unity, the coalescing behind Romney that is likely to come once he really secures the nomination and the Republican Party becomes more unified. We expect a change in some of these state-by-state numbers. I suspect you'll see the Gallup swing state numbers be a lot closer next time than they are right now.
And again, back to the general election, we're about to have Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz on to speak about the women's vote. And do you see any gender gap there? Is that definitely advantage Obama there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, there was a religious freedom issue that the conservatives were trying to advance for this election, and Rush Limbaugh hijacked that issue, and the Democrats were advantaged tremendously by that. We see a huge gender gap right now in the numbers, favoring clearly President Obama and his re-election prospects. If that's there, and we're talking late October, and that number is still there, then in fact this election would be likely to be all but done. I mean, it's a serious problem for the Republicans right now.
Lee, thanks very much for being with us. Thanks for parsing the polls for us. Lee Mehringhoff of the Marist Institute. We're going to go now to the chairman of the Democratic Party, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who joins us from Washington. Debbie,
St. Louis, actually.
Oh, you're in St. Louis.
Yes.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks very much for being with us. It looks like it's going to be a good night for Mitt Romney. It looks like he'll win the primaries in all three of those states. What does that tell you about the general election?
Well, what's happened to Mitt Romney is he's going to emerge whenever this very lengthy, elongated Republican primary does come to an end as the most unpopular nominee, really, probably, certainly in recent presidential history, but possibly in history completely, because he has had to embrace extremism, run as far to the right as possible. The Republican primary has been a circular firing squad, and particularly with women, he has done his level best to successfully alienate women to where there is, about an 18-point gender gap now favoring President Obama, and understandably so.
And so looking at the populace overall, leaving women aside for a second, do you feel that the biggest issue will be something like the economy, or is health care that vital an issue right now?
Oh, there's no question that jobs in the economy is the number one issue. Unfortunately, the Republicans don't seem to realize that because they are obsessed with cultural issues and have spent the last several months, as we've all seen, refighting a debate that I thought was settled before I was born on whether or not women should have access to affordable birth control, and whether or not we should make sure that it's women that decide what kinds of access to health care they should have and not their bosses, like in the Blunt-Rubio amendment.
Congresswoman,
that was debated in the Senate.
You made several references to health care. Can you explain what the president was doing yesterday when he seemed to be suggesting that the Supreme Court didn't have the right to declare the health care law unconstitutional? Was he attempting to influence the court's decision? What was the purpose of those clearly planned and very strong comments?
President Obama has repeatedly, over the last several days, expressed confidence that the Supreme Court will uphold the Affordable Care Act as constitutional. I think that's exactly what he was saying. It's what he meant. And but really,
he seemed to suggest that they couldn't declare a law passed by an elected body unconstitutional. Of course, the Supreme Court has been doing that for 200 years. That's what Marbury versus Madison was about.
I'm quite sure that's not what he was suggesting. Let's remember that before President Obama was president, he was a constitutional, a professor of constitutional law. So he very clearly knows what the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court is versus the executive branch versus the legislative branch.
With the healthcare issue and the divide, like the balance of the Supreme Court, how much do you think Republican or Democratic voters coming into the general election will be thinking, who gets to appoint the next Supreme Court justice?
You've got some pretty senior members of that court.
We have 4 in their 70s. Anyone ready to retire, or do you think that's a factor in people's minds when they pull the lever?
I think it's certainly going to be a factor, particularly for women. But the number one focus, I think, is clearly going to be the making sure that we have a president in the White House who is going to stand up for the middle class, stand up for working families, and Mitt Romney has consistently proven that his focus is on millionaires and billionaires, on continuing subsidies for big oil, on making sure people who are already doing well can do even better. And the notion of trickle-down economics, which has been proven time and again to not work, and in fact not produce jobs, is what they've on the right continue to embrace. And President Obama made a strong case today that we need to give everybody in America an opportunity to be successful, not just people who already are.
Congresswoman, I know you're the chairwoman of the DNC, but listening to your remarks tonight, listening to what the president has said over the last 2 days, it sure seems like the general election campaign has fully begun. Would you agree with that?
No, the Republican primary is not quite over. Mitt Romney, at this point, I think after tonight, will be at only a little more than half of the delegates that he needs to secure the nomination. So unless I'm off the mark, it doesn't appear that any of his opponents are ready to drop out. So I think he's going to have to slog his way through to the number of delegates he needs to actually be the nominee. And in the meantime, we're going to focus on using their primary as an organizing tool. We've had hundreds of thousands of door knocks, volunteers all over the country, office openings, house parties. So we're getting ready for the general election, and when it begins, President Obama is going to be focused on making sure that the American people understand the dramatic contrast between the direction he's brought this country, standing up and fighting for the middle class and working families, and Mitt Romney and the Republican Party, who really believes that we need to make sure that we lift up people who are already doing pretty well.
All right, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. It's going to be a long and hard-fought campaign, we can tell. Thank you for being here. Let's just take a quick recap of the votes. We know that Mitt Romney has been declared the winner of the Republican primary in Maryland. He has also been declared the winner in the District of Columbia. Here's what it looks like in Wisconsin right now. 5% of the votes in. Fairly close, 41.3% for Mitt Romney, 39.4% for Rick Santorum. Fox News, however, has declared the race for Romney. I'm sorry, who else? CNN and Fox News have both declared the race for Mitt Romney based on these numbers, on exit polls, and on the demographic pattern of the vote. So it looks like a very good night, Christine.
Those numbers look really tight, though. I know it's only 5%, and I know there's a lot of other things going into it, but
when they make those projections, part of what they're doing is looking at where the votes are coming in from and where the places they haven't.
Whether it's the rural areas or the city.
I think the networks have, in recent years, become pretty conservative about these things. And if you look at the exit polls, there seemed to be a several-point advantage for Mitt Romney in the voters coming out of the polls. So.
I want to see them change there. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep an eye on it. It's not over till it's over, but we'll see. We're in the headquarters of the Wall Street Journal, and one floor below us, the editors are trying to put together tomorrow's paper. We're going to go to Deputy Managing Editor Alex Martin, who's in charge of a big part of that effort, and get him to tell us how things are looking. Alex, are you there?
Hey, Alan, how are you?
So how's the paper looking for tomorrow?
Well, we've got a main story that looks at the big night that Mitt Romney seems to be having. We have an analysis by Washington Bureau Chief Jerry Sudd that looks at the campaign as it moves forward, and a couple of stories that suss out what the Romney and Santorum campaigns will be doing, as well as a look at exit polls.
So, Alex, would it be better for you if we had a closer race here, you know, give a little more tension, a little more excitement, or does it, do you want to prolong this thing, or are you ready to see Mitt Romney rack up the votes and move on to the general election?
I'm ready to see a good story wherever it comes from.
Good answer.
Good answer.
Good answer.
Unbiased. Just report it as it happens. That's all he's going to do.
What else is on the front page besides the election?
Well, let's see. We've got the Chinese premier proposing some financial reforms, and a look at the Iranian spy master who is countering the U.S.'s moves in the Mideast, as well as our funny A-head feature story about a Walmart campaign to let inventors get their wacky inventions on their shelves.
I think that's going to be very widely
That'd be good.
read. Yes.
We'll read that. Alex, thanks
Sure.
for that sneak preview of tomorrow morning's paper. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to go over the delegate math with Neil King in Washington. Welcome back to Campaign Journal. Big night for Mitt Romney. He has been declared the winner of the Republican primaries in Wisconsin, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. We'll pick up a substantial number of delegates. We don't have the exact count, Christine, but we know it takes him over halfway to his goal.
More than 600 now, and I'm sure that Neil has the exact number.
Neil King in Washington, the man counting the delegates. Tell us what it looks like to you.
Well, I mean, he's going to emerge this evening as an interesting kind of Waterloo moment of sorts. I mean, Santorum put the best spin on it by saying it's only halftime. We've still got the second half of this game. I mean, it is true. Romney will have just and more cleared the halfway point, so he'll be in the mid-600s. You need 1,144 delegates to seal the thing. But, you know, now the lead he's going to have over Santorum is going to be well over 300 delegates and widening. And, you know, tonight it's very possible that he could pick up all of the delegates on offer. It looks like that'll be the case in Maryland, and we know that'll be the case in D.C. The key in Wisconsin is to whether Romney wins all the congressional districts or not, and it's quite likely, I would think, that Rick Santorum will at least win a couple of those. So those are worth 3 delegates apiece.
And Neil, he moves from here into some pretty favorable territory, right? If you look at that April 24th primary.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the next series of races, we have Connecticut, Delaware, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. All of those are worth 231 delegates. So it's really very likely, I wouldn't say foregone, but something close to that, that everything aside from Pennsylvania, because of the nature of those I-95 kind of classic suburban corridor sort of states. I mean, obviously New York State is very large, diverse. There's a lot of different slices of the Republican electorate there. But then again, what Romney has done is winning big in kind of the urban and suburban areas, and there's a lot of that on offer in New York. So I think it's fair to say he'll probably win all of the states, with Pennsylvania being not only a close call, but a very complicated picture, because just winning the beauty contest is of no relevance there. It's all about whose delegates by name are elected. And I think we could at least just say right now that it'll be basically a split. I don't think it's very likely that Rick Santorum's people, who won't even have his name next to their names on the ballot, are going to emerge in greater numbers than, say, Mitt Romney's people. So this is not going to be a good month all the way around for Rick Santorum.
And so when you see the end of the month come, and if there's, you said maybe 300 available in the next month? So that's
well, in the rest of this month, there are 231.
So Romney jumps to mid-800s or so.
Right.
Right.
So journalists love to talk about the scenario where Romney gets to the convention without enough votes to put him over the top, and you have a dramatic brokered convention, you know, shades of 1976. At this point, that's looking pretty unlikely, isn't it?
Well, you know, it was interesting, and I recommend, I can't offer a link right here on air, but Josh Putnam, who we've quoted several times and worked alongside on some stories out of Davidson College, did a kind of interesting model with Ryan Lizza from the New Yorker today, where basically they were being a little bit more sophisticated than some of the stuff we've done, and they've been saying, all right, if you can look at each state and each congressional district and kind of model it for the amount of evangelical voters and different voters, kind of weight the outcome, and then see how the vote would turn out there going forward. They were saying that, according to that model, Mitt Romney would get just shy, 22 shy, of the bound delegates by the last day of the race on the 26th, I think it is, of June. So there at that point would be like 500 unbound delegates from all these caucuses and all these other things, that would only 25 of them would go over to him, but I think in the reality it would be hundreds of them would go over to him, and that would push him over. But that shows how weirdly close and sort of suspenseful this thing could still remain.
And on your tweets tonight, as we've been really watching them pretty closely, there was one point where you said that 3/4 of the voters in Maryland who voted for Romney were over 40, or 3/4 that came out were over 40. Do you have any of the details of the types of voters who came out tonight?
Well, you know, it'd be interesting, and I haven't really had the leisure to look through that stuff really closely. And, you know, obviously, if the Republicans were looking towards November and anything close to 70, I think it was in Maryland, it was 77% of all voters who came out and voted in the Republican primary were over 45. Mm-hmm. And in a general election, that would be a total disaster, because you obviously don't want the vast majority of your voters only representing one side of the age spectrum. And it's already kind of clear, I think, if you can judge, and I don't know, you know, I wasn't certainly voting in primaries when I was 25, but, you know, the Republicans seem to have a little bit of a youth challenge at the moment, judging by what we've seen over the last couple of months, where most of the people that have turned out, particularly under 35, have been Ron Paul people.
Yeah, we're going to have to cut you off there, Neil, because Mitt Romney is getting ready to speak in Wisconsin. Let's go to Wisconsin, where he's standing by. He, of course, has been declared the winner of all 3 states at stake tonight, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and Wisconsin. Let's listen.
This really has been quite a night. We've won a great victory tonight in our campaign to restore the promise of America. And here in the heartland, you know, you're not going to find Americans with bigger hearts than the people of Wisconsin. You know, but as I've been traveling across the state, I've visited with far too many whose hearts are filled with anxiety about their future. So many good and decent people seem to be running harder just to stay in place. And for many, no matter how hard they're running, every day it seems to put them a little further behind. It's that way across so much of America, too much of America. Under this president's watch, more Americans have lost their jobs than during any other period since the Depression. Millions have lost their homes. A record number of Americans are now living in poverty. And the most vulnerable are the ones that have been hurt the most. 30% of single moms are now living in poverty. New business startups, and that's normally where we get job growth after a recession. New business startups are down to the lowest level in 30 years. And of course, you know our national debt is at a record high. And when you drive home tonight and you stop by the gas station, just take a look at the prices and then ask yourself, 4 more years of that? I agree. And that's why it's important to understand one extraordinary fact about this election. President Obama thinks he's doing a good job. I'm not kidding. He actually thinks he's doing a great job. He thinks he's doing an historically great job, like Abraham Lincoln and LBJ and FDR. And no, he did not say that on Saturday Night Live, all right? It's enough to make you think that years of flying around in Air Force One, surrounded by an adoring staff of true believers, telling you that you're great and you're doing a great job, it's enough to make you think that you might become a little out of touch with that. And that's what's happened. This campaign is going to deal with many complicated issues. But there is a basic choice that we're going to face. The president has pledged to transform America. And he spent the last 4 years laying the foundation for a new government-centered society. I will spend the next 4 years rebuilding the foundation of an opportunity society led by free people and free enterprises. And you know, the different visions we have, I think, are a product of the different lives we've led, the life experiences, the values we have. When he was a community organizer and communities were hurt by plant closings, his reaction was to turn to the government for help. He saw free enterprise as the villain and government as a solution. He never seemed to grasp the very basic point that a plant closes when a business loses money. So today, when the president attacks business and when his policies make it more difficult for business to grow and prosper, he's also attacking the very communities he had wanted to help. Or at least that's how it works when America is working. But under Barack Obama, America hasn't been working. The ironic tragedy is that the community organizer who wanted to help those that were hurt by a plant closing became the president on whose watch more jobs have been lost than any time since the Great Depression. In Barack Obama's government-centered society, the government has to do more because the economy is doomed to do less. Because when you attack business and you vilify success, you're going to have less business and less success. And then, of course, the debate becomes about how much to extend unemployment insurance because you've guaranteed there will be millions more unemployed. In Barack Obama's government-centered society, tax increases not only become a necessity, but also a desired tool for social justice. In that world of shrinking means, there's a finite amount of money. And as someone once famously said, you need to have some taxes to spread the wealth around. In Barack Obama's government-centered society, government spending always increases. Because, well, why not? There's always someone who's entitled to something more and who's willing to vote for anyone who will give them something more. Now, by the way, we know where that kind of that transformation of a free society into a government-centered society leads. Because there are other nations that have followed that path. And it leads to chronic high unemployment, crushing debt, and stagnant wages. It's beginning to sound familiar, isn't it? I don't want to transform America. I want to restore to America the economic values of freedom and opportunity and limited government that made us the powerhouse of the world. It's opportunity. It's opportunity, not a check from government. It's opportunity that has always driven America and defined us as Americans. Now, I'm not naive enough to believe that free enterprise is the solution to all of our problems. But nor am I naive enough to doubt that it's one of the greatest forces for good this world has ever known. Free enterprise has done more to lift people out of poverty, to help build a strong middle class, to help educate our kids, and to make our lives better than all the programs of government combined. If we become one of those societies that attacks success, one outcome is certain. There'll be a lot less success. And that's not who we are. The promise of America has always been that if you worked hard, had the right values, took some risks, that there was an opportunity to build a better life for your family and for your next generation. This means that government has to be smaller and have strict limits placed on its power. Obamacare violates both those principles, and I will get rid of it. Taxes have to be as low as possible and in line with those of the competing nations around the world, designed to foster innovation and growth. That's why I will cut marginal taxes across the board. I want to create good jobs in this country. Let's get the taxes down for employers. Now, we of course understand in a free market that regulations are necessary and critical, but they have to be continuously updated, streamlined, modernized. And regulators have to see their job not just as cracking down on the bad guys, but also as protecting economic freedom and promoting enterprise and fostering job creation. Washington has to become an ally of business, not the opposition of business. Now, workers should have the right to join unions, but unions should not be forced upon workers. And unions should not have the power to take money out of their members' paychecks to buy the support of politicians that are favored by the union bosses. You know, out-of-touch liberals like Barack Obama say they want a strong economy, but in everything they do, they show they don't like business very much. But the economy, of course, is simply the product of all the businesses in the nation added together. So it's a bit like saying you like an omelet, but you don't like eggs. You know, to build a strong economy that provides good jobs and rising wages and that reduces poverty, we have to build successful businesses of every kind imaginable. And President Obama has been attacking successful businesses of every kind imaginable. We've always been a country of dreamers, where dreamers can have dreams, where one dream helps launch another. And if those dreamers are rewarded with prosperity, we view that as a reason that others will be encouraged to dream big as well. Now, these last few years have been difficult, made a lot worse by the mistakes and failures of the president's leadership. But if the hill before us is a little steeper, we've always been a nation of big steppers. In this last year, I've been all over the country, from student unions to kitchen tables, from factory break rooms to boardrooms, and I've heard frustration and anger, but rarely hopelessness. A lot of Americans have given up on the president, but they haven't thought about giving up. Not on themselves, not on each other, and not on America. We have a duty placed upon our shoulders by the founders of the nation, a sacred duty to restore the promise of America. And we'll do it. And we'll do it because we believe in America. Tonight I'm asking the good people of Pennsylvania, New York, Rhode Island, Delaware, and Connecticut to join me. Join me in the next step toward that destination of November 6th, when across America we can give a sigh of relief and know that the promise of America has been kept. The dreamers can dream a little bigger. The help wanted signs can get dusted off and put in the front yard, and we can start again. And this time we're going to get it right. We'll stop the days of apologizing for success at home and never again apologize for America abroad. Together we'll build the greatest America we've ever known, where prosperity is grown and shared, not limited and divided. An America that guarantees that ours is the door that innovation and greatness always knocks on first. There was a time not so long ago when each of us could walk a little taller and stand a little straighter because we had a gift that no one else in the world had. We're Americans. That meant something different to each of us, but it meant something special to all of us. We do it without question. So do the people in the rest of the world. Those days are coming back. That's our destiny. So join me. Walk together. Take another step every day until November 6th. We believe in America. We believe in ourselves. Our greatest days are still ahead. We are, after all, Americans. God bless this great country. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Thanks, you guys. Thanks for the victory in Wisconsin and Maryland and District of Columbia. Thanks, you guys.
That's Mitt Romney speaking in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he has been declared the winner of the Wisconsin Republican primary, also declared the winner in Maryland and in the District of Columbia. And Christine, that was a classic general election campaign. He was talking poverty, he was talking jobs, he was talking economy, and no mention of his primary candidates.
Santorum, never heard the word Gingrich.
Paul,
no, and Obama. He was really going after him.
He did take one small detour where he talked about the voters of Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, New York.
Help me out there, he's saying.
The April
get us
24th
to November,
primary.
he was saying. Yes.
But he's clearly now, and this isn't the first time, by the way, that he's tried to turn attention to the general election. But boy, that was so clearly a general election speech. This is what we're going to hear from Mitt Romney in going after Obama. Let's go to Pennsylvania right now, where Danny Yadrin is at Santorum headquarters. I don't know if you got to hear that, Danny, but Mitt Romney did make a specific appeal to Pennsylvania voters to support him on his move towards the general election. If you look at the current polls right now, Santorum has a lead, but it's not a huge lead. And if a sense of inevitability gathers around Romney, it could begin to erode, couldn't it?
Exactly. And the thing to note in those polls is that, yes, Santorum is leading, but he used to be leading by a lot more. And if you look at the exit polls today, he wasn't doing as well with groups, that have been sort of the bedrock of the Santorum.
Do we still have him there?
No, I think we just lost.
Yeah, here he goes.
Yeah.
Danny, you're at the headquarters now. Were you in the room when Santorum was giving his speech?
I was, and actually I caught the end of Romney's speech here on the audio, and it was notable, how different they were. Romney very much sounded like he was talking about the general election, and Santorum here, he kept saying this is halftime. This thing is far from over. We have a long way to go. He was talking about states well beyond Pennsylvania, and he was going to great lengths to remind Pennsylvanians that he's one of them. He said, you know all about me, or you know me, and these were things he said repeatedly.
And tell us about the people in the room. Were they behind him? Did they realize what they're up against? What's the tone?
It was interesting. It was interesting, actually, because, there were a few hundred people here in what is a very large hotel ballroom, and yes, there were chants of "Go Rick, go Rick, go," and things like that, and there are obviously some people that are very much behind him, but you could definitely find supporters who already think this thing is over. I was talking to one man who was really interesting. He was invited to a friends and family reception beforehand with the senator, and said, I voted for Rick when he was running for Congress, running for Senate. This guy is my guy. I knew his dad. But I think Mitt Romney is the guy who's going to win, and I want this primary to be over. And that is sort of what he's up against here. And the ad wars haven't even started yet.
Well, I want to try one more time to play that quote from Rick Santorum on Meet the Press about Pennsylvania. As you say, he's clearly going to stay in until April 24th in the Pennsylvania primary. But if you listen to what he said on Meet the Press, it's going to be very difficult, I would think, for him to eat those words if he doesn't win in Pennsylvania. Can we play that now? We can't play it now. Okay, but you heard it, Danny, I'm sure. He said, Pennsylvania, we have to win Pennsylvania. We're going to win Pennsylvania. I have no doubt about that. If he doesn't win Pennsylvania, is that the end of the line?
But by any reasonable measure, yes. I mean, we were talking to John Bravender, his chief strategist today, and he said, on record, whoever wins Pennsylvania will be the nominee. And that's about as close as you can say, Pennsylvania is a must-win as you can.
Then another spokesman today was talking about Texas. How do these two ideas coexist if they're saying, we're looking ahead to Texas. Texas is important, which is a month after.
It is. I mean, that is late May. We're talking Memorial Day then. And but the thing, I mean, they are very confident they can win the Pennsylvania popular vote.
Yeah. Danny, are you
breaking up, guys?
Sorry, we were just breaking up a little bit. You staying in Pennsylvania through the 24th?
Well, the senator, he's a practicing Catholic. He will actually be taking 4 days off for the Easter holiday. He'll be going back to Virginia. But he has a full day of campaigning here tomorrow, and we'll be on the road with him.
All right. Well, thanks very much for being with us. We're going to go now to Romney headquarters, where Sarah Murray is standing by. She was there for Governor Romney's speech. And Sarah, we were just talking about clearly focused on November 6th, very much a general election speech.
That is absolutely a general election speech, and, it's not the first time we've heard it either.
So you've heard the speech before. It was last week in Appleton, and you cite some change in language where he really uses the term government-centered society, and that's, it is a switch. You think your story said that he had used the phrase entitlement more. Do you see more changes like that in the language he's using? I'm not sure she can hear me.
I don't think. Yeah. Can you hear us, Sarah?
Yeah.
All right, we'll come.
Maybe she can only hear you, Alan.
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good. We were just talking about, you said that you've heard the speech before, but there were some changes in the language. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically what they're trying to do, they're definitely pivoting to a general election message here. And one of the more interesting things that they're doing is they're trying to paint the president as being out of touch. And you've heard it tonight in Romney's line about, maybe you lose touch with Americans when you're riding around on Air Force One. Obviously, if you're a multi-millionaire like Mitt Romney is, then you've also been accused of being out of touch. This is a risky line of attack.
Yeah, so we've got some the latest results here on the board from Wisconsin. Just want to go over them. We still only have about 15% of the precincts in, but 43.3% for Romney, 38.1% Santorum. That's about the margin that the exit polls suggested. It's not an overwhelming win, but Sarah, it's a very solid win, correct?
Yeah, and that's what they were looking for. He has spent the past few days campaigning in a relatively small part of southern Wisconsin, but he's had a really full campaign schedule considering this is roughly, the margin he was ahead when he first got to this state. But they definitely wanted to make sure that they could come to kind of a solid victory here. And even now they have plans to go on to Pennsylvania tomorrow, which they don't expect to win, but they do want to offer Rick Santorum a challenge on his home turf.
So you're not hearing a lot of optimism about their ability to actually win Pennsylvania?
No, not right now. Right now they're downplaying their odds of winning Pennsylvania, saying they realize it's Rick Santorum's home state and they don't have any expectations there. Now, the one thing that we've seen consistently from the Romney campaign this cycle is they tend to do that early on, and then if it starts looking better in the polls for them, they get a little bit more optimistic. So, we'll see how that rhetoric changes over the next couple of weeks.
Do you know how much time he'll be spending in the state over the next few weeks, or is he going to dot and go to the other states as well up the corridor?
They definitely say they plan on campaigning in multiple states. They haven't said whether they'll actually go to all 5 yet. I would say that part of it kind of depends. I think they're going to have a meeting, after Wisconsin and try to figure out what their best strategy is in terms of where to spend their time going forward. And so we're still kind of waiting for a definitive answer on that.
All right, Sarah, thanks very much for that. I'm sure they're very happy people there at Romney headquarters in Milwaukee. They'll be celebrating the night. Try not to get too caught up in the celebration. You're a reporter, need to stay away from all the alcohol and partying.
She's got to go back to Deadline anyway, right? She has a print story to do tonight.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get some more on the three-state win for Mitt Romney tonight in Wisconsin, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. Stay with us. Welcome back to Campaign Journal. A big night for Mitt Romney, a three-state win. Let's quickly recap the results. In Wisconsin, the most contested state of the evening, there's 17% of precincts reported. Romney has 43.2%, Santorum 38.1%, Ron Paul a distant third at 10.8%, and Newt Gingrich at 6%. These are still early results, but based on the pattern of the votes coming in, Mitt Romney has been declared the winner. Let's take a look at Maryland, if we can. The Maryland primary, we now have 26% of the results in. Romney, a very clear winner, 47.4% of the votes. Santorum, 30.6%. And then in the District of Columbia, where, well, that's not the District of Columbia. There's the District of Columbia, where Rick Santorum was not on the ballot. Romney, strong win, 68.1%. Ron Paul, second at 13.4%. Christine, let's go to Jerry Seib in Washington. And Jerry, give us your sense of what we've learned tonight.
Well, I think we've learned that Mitt Romney is marching toward the nomination, and pretty much at the pace we thought he would. I think we also learned that Rick Santorum is essentially staking everything that's left in his campaign in his home state of Pennsylvania. He was there tonight. He talked from Pennsylvania. He talked as if somebody who plans to win Pennsylvania and who will continue on if he does win Pennsylvania. But I thought the most interesting thing tonight, Alan, was that you saw Mitt Romney give a general election speech while celebrating victories in a Republican primary in Wisconsin. He didn't even talk about the Republican primary process in his victory speech. He talked entirely about the president as if this was a Democrat versus a Republican general election campaign already. That's, I think, what you're going to see more of from the Romney campaign now.
Totally focused on the economy, all about the economy, jobs, poverty, and so forth.
Right, exactly, and in its own way, a perfect counter to the speech President Obama gave earlier today, which we talked about in our first segment, which was a speech in which he talked about the way Republicans are creating a distorted economy that benefits the rich and hurts the poor and is going to drag America down by distorting the kind of help the government needs to give to make a more vibrant economy. So you had today two visions of what the economic debate is supposed to be about in the fall, and are happening in spite of the fact that Mitt Romney does not have the nomination in hand yet, and probably won't for 6 weeks to 2 months, till the end of May or early June, possibly. So we're in this strange world, which we saw on display tonight, in which we're halfway through a primary season, yet halfway into the general election campaign at the same time.
So would you expect to see Obama weighing in the way he did today frequently over the next few months, or is he just going to hang back and wait?
Yeah, well, I think some, I think you have to look at the speech that the president gave today and say that this was the opening bell of his general election campaign. I mean, that was the context of the speech explicitly. He talked about Mitt Romney by name in the speech, and it was clearly designed to frame the economic argument. So once you've done that, I think you can expect the president to come back to it periodically. Look, he's got a lot of other things to do, and there's a danger at this early stage in seeming to focus too much on the campaign because people still expect you to run the country. Nonetheless, I think there was a bell that went off, and the president is moving down that path, and I think you can expect to see him continue to make steps down that path.
Yeah, well, it's clearly game on for the general election. Jerry, I have to ask you before you go, what happened to your Kansas basketball team last night?
You know, if the game had just gone for a couple more minutes, we were finally catching up at the end. But look, you know, I mean, we'll take second place in the country. That's fine. I'm happy with that.
Well done. Just say.
All right. Congratulations. Thanks very much. Christine, any final observations before we sign off here?
No, I think it'd be an interesting, I'm looking forward to Pennsylvania now after this exercise tonight. I think if that's where he's putting all his stakes, we're going to see what happens there.
It could be an interesting one to watch. The last poll I saw seemed to have a 4 or 5 percentage point lead. As Danny Yadrin pointed out, that lead has narrowed over the last couple of days, so it could become an interesting competitive race. All right, thank you very much for being with us on Campaign Journal tonight. As we've been talking about, Mitt Romney has been declared the winner in all 3 Republican primaries of the night: Wisconsin, Maryland, District of Columbia. Stay with us for continued coverage of politics, and don't miss the AM Hub tomorrow morning at 8:30. Thanks for being with us.